Hello, everyone. My name is Smogan, and I'm happy to have all of you join us for this episode of Heart of Scrolls. We are now several weeks into the new Wild metagame. Mojang has moved to shake things up even further with the release of a new patch on the test server this past Tuesday, and this one's a big one. Probably our biggest balance patch yet, and certainly no patch has led to more overall scrolls being changed. The focus of our show today will be how this patch, including several new keyword traits, major changes to some of the most used scrolls like Quake and Damon Curse, and nerfs to cross-resource ramp scrolls like Darkstrike, will affect the game moving forward. I'm joined today, as always, by three mainstays of the Scrolls community. First up is perhaps the most well-known, dedicated Order player our small community has ever seen. He's also perhaps the most dedicated test server player. He is always harassing us to get on the test server and play games with him. So you cannot blame this man if not enough testing is getting done. So, you guys guessed it, this is to Overlord. Welcome back to the show, to Overlord.
Thank you.
Also returning to the show is Sisp. As many of you know, Sisp has been heavily involved in Scrolls since Alpha and doesn't need a whole lot of introduction anymore. He has his fingerprints all over many of the top decks, especially energy decks in our game. Always happy to have you on the show, Sisp.
Always happy to be here.
And joining us for the first time is our third guest, Spiffy Drew. Spiffy is the founder of the Think Tank, so he's someone from outside the Badger Guild, and he's one of the main community members responsible for kickstarting the guild culture in Scrolls. He's also doing his very best Scout from Team Fortress 2 impression for us, so please show off your bat. I'm very happy to have you join us, Spiffy Drew.
Yeah, awesome to be here. Really good to be here. Thank you.
Now say that with a Boston accent, if you will.
I parked my car in the Harvard Yard, and
Nice.
it's good to be here.
Nice.
We
Not a lot
can't
of people
call you
can
on
do
that
that when
one.
put on the spot. I love it.
We'll trust that's a good one.
It's actually
Says
pretty
the guy
close.
from Sweden. Yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you to everyone for coming on the show, and thank you to all of you viewers that are joining us live on Twitch, as well as our listeners on YouTube and now on iTunes. If you're feeling bold, feel free to go to YouTube and iTunes and download, like, thumbs up, rate, or whatever it is the cool kids are doing these days to show that they love us and respect us and want our show to be popular. So without further ado, I'd like to start our show by asking our guests to talk about some decks that they've been playing the last few weeks. Sisp, I'm going to put you on the spot first. Can you talk about a deck that you've been messing around with lately?
A lot of decks, actually. Didn't find a lot of them I liked until I tried Blinkist one, the last one that they did the deck tech on. Everyone seems to be playing that one now. I think it's a really well-constructed deck, and it also highlights then the fact that when you have a deck that rises to a bit of prominence, then the mirror matchups actually tend to get some work as well. So you have to think about how you play with Decay against Decay, for instance, which is always fun, I think. Not enough is said about that part of the game. But I'm thinking with the new energy build now. I couldn't help myself. I'm back to building something hybrid now. Also to prey a little bit on the Decay meta here. So
You had a very good kind of Decay hybrid control deck going about a month ago or so. They got you to #1 spot, but you moved away from that to test some new things. Is your deck similar to that?
Yeah, I got a little bit fed up on that one. I tend to grow a bit restless when the deck becomes that polished. So I tried all different things. Then after that, I tried Berserker, Verdant Whale, and all of that crazy shenanigans. Most of them with really bad results, I think. But I had fun, and I learned. I found some new play things, and so I'm a little bit tempted actually to do a hybrid build now around Oculus Cannon, and I got some interesting brews going there.
Well, thank you for the insight. Spiffy Drew, I'm going to move on to you next. Will you talk about a deck you've been playing lately?
Yeah. On live server, I've kind of been playing around with Decay and Order. I was using the build that Rotsbangle made. Kind of a little heavy on the poison side, but using Tempo Theft and Harvester and all that nonsense. But I've mainly been sticking on test server. And on test server, I've been trying a bunch of stuff, but trying to really tweak the secret tech of the YOLO Decay. People just don't understand yet. So it's getting there. YOLO Decay is fun. As far as other stuff on the new test server that I want to look at, looking on some more Decay Order stuff, and we'll see. We'll see. I'm definitely going to try and stay away from Decay growth unless a beast build kind of strikes my fancy.
A lot of people have been talking about those beast builds, but I haven't seen one really get over the hump, if you will. What are your thoughts on a beast build?
Yeah, that's the problem. It hasn't gotten over the hump. It's good in theory and it's good on paper, but will it actually work is yet to be seen. So not
a
really
few too many moving parts that don't always come together nicely, maybe.
Yeah, and then some of the beast specific scrolls are really good, but they're really not good. It's kind of weird. Like, it should work. It should be like, oh, that's great, but I think more times than not, you don't have enough beast out for it to actually be worth anything.
That makes sense because there's just not a lot of beasts out there at all.
There really isn't. I mean, you can play owls, but it's just going to die, and it just. And one of the other problems too is if you still need to play other non-beast stuff in order for it to be to work smoothly. Like, you need to play Brother Wolf, human.
Right.
Yes, it pumps out beast, but it's a human. So that right there is one slot that could be a beast that isn't. So.
Okay. Well, thank you for chatting about that.
No problem.
Overlord, I'm going to shift over to you. I know you've been playing, obviously, a lot of Order on the main server and also a lot of Order on the test server. Will you talk a little bit about how your builds are differing from each other?
Yeah, I play tempo Order, as most other people doing when I'm checking how the meta is going in the ranked, to see how it's shifting and what is being popular and not. And then I am trying to make Mangonel work. It's not really working. I'm trying to make Imperial work. It's sort of work, but it's not stronger than Tempo Order. And then I tried some mid-range deck that is not really... that are based on not need to win fast, but can keep on going, so to speak. And then after that, I done some on my refined strategy deck that is pretty much just for fun. You use refined strategy and put those mangonels all over the place. And on test server, I've been working very much on a enchantment deck that is actually quite potent. I don't think it's actually stronger than Tempo Order, and that makes me sad, but it is a strong deck.
I did just lose twice to it horribly with a mono NG structure deck that wasn't very good, but still lost horribly to your deck twice.
Yeah, so that's what I've been doing.
You also can't forget the fact that you are now playing something else besides Order.
What is this?
He's playing Order with a splash of something.
My worldview is shook.
Splash I do from time to time. Before I did that Iron Whip Soldier Bond splash, which we may refer to later on, I have tried several times with the whole idea with Desperation and Machination splashing to Order to increase the skirmish output. It's just that it's not giving enough value for the drawback into splashing. But
yeah,
I've done splashing before.
All right. So now I'm going to move into the meat of the show. As many of our viewers know, there's been quite the outcry in the community over the last 2 weeks following the release of Wild on the live server and especially in ranked. A number of Wild ramp control decks have become very popular, particularly Decay Growth, Decay Energy, and also Decay Order. So really you can splash Decay with anything and make a powerful ramp control deck. These decks take advantage of the very powerful cross-resource ramp scrolls available from Decay, like Dark Strike, Return to Nature, Energy Siphon, etc., to build up powerful resource reserves while removing early opponent units. Other players have, of course, responded to this by playing very aggressive mono-order, mono-growth aggro decks that seek to win very fast before the control decks can set up. And lots of players have responded to this by saying that they're concerned that this leads to an quote-unquote unfun metagame where you're either playing these late-game control decks or you're playing an aggro deck that has to win by round 10 or you know you're going to lose horribly and slowly and painfully. And basically that mid-range decks, which have been the bread and butter of Scrolls for, well, a year, it's the 1 year anniversary of Scrolls this week, at least coming out from beta, these mid-range decks are going away. I'm not 100% sure that that concern is fully supported, but either way, there is that concern in the community. Mojang has responded by releasing the .123 balance patch on the test server, and like I said earlier, this patch is huge. Tons of scrolls are affected, including buffs to some really underused enchantments, nerfs to some of the most used scrolls in the game, new mechanics, etc. And I'd like to talk now about how these changes have really, how they will affect things going forward should they end up on live. So one of the major stated goals of this patch, according to the developers, is again to nerf unfun control decks without hurting other wild decks, because they do want wild decks to be a major piece of the metagame. And to this end, they've attacked Dark Strike, Vigor Extraction by making them more expensive. The taxing mechanic was added to Return to Nature, so on and so forth. So, Cisp, I'm going to start with you again. Do you think that these changes will help Mojang achieve their goal of nerfing control decks without completely destroying all wild decks?
It seems like Mojang is mostly concerned about. I don't think that they are or should be terribly worried about the exact balance at this point. Given that we're such a small community, I think that we are getting through the cycles of, like, when we have a available card pool, it feels like there's not enough time is spent to exhaust it before we start thinking about what it could have been instead. But the time that people spend there in that card pool and in that meta is it's important that it's fun. I mean, the scroll is not a mathematical exercise of trying to find the best decks, at least for most people.
Speak for yourself.
Yeah, well, it depends. I sometimes I approach it that way, but it's the important thing is that you're playing something that's fun and playing against something that is fun. And given that the community shifts into a particular state where we're like, okay, but Wild seems to be the thing now. Everyone's playing Wild. It was the same thing when Wild was released on test server. I mean, you couldn't, or in the testing grounds, you couldn't get the regular game over there after that because it was the new thing. So I think it's a little bit more of the new thing is shaping up what the exact meta is, not necessarily what's the most powerful when every option is exhausted.
I think that's a really good point that we have kind of two issues here. We have a power level issue, and then we have a just what's being played a lot issue. My perception, and I think it's really early to say this, is that the wild decks aren't necessarily more powerful than a traditional aggro growth deck or aggro order deck, but they're just being played a lot and maybe aren't a lot of fun to play against.
There is an unfun part in every... if you've ever been on the wrong side of a combo deck in Magic, especially one that takes a while to win, and you want them to go through all the motions so you can see what exact cards you're playing, but you're sitting there waiting to be killed for like 10 minutes when they like cycle cards. Some of these decks, it's not as bad in Scrolls, but some of these decks are just doing stuff to do more stuff, and then do stuff, and then your creature dies, and you play another creature next turn that you didn't get to attack, and then that dies. And yeah, it's not a very fun part when you know the outcome of that, and feeling that you have to concede at that point it's a bit dejecting that you don't feel that you have a comeback part. So it is a problem from a fun standpoint sometimes, these decks, and I don't know if it's the slowness of Scrolls when it comes to the pace creatures are attacking and so on that is causing it also. But I think that's the main problem with it, that it's, and I think also that's what they're trying to fix. They're trying to, I think they're trying to at this point both try to make it a little bit less powerful with control to make sure that the meta change a little bit, but also they're trying to do these buffs that are more like indicators to people that say that other stuff can be played, go out and experiment. And that's not necessarily that they're raising the power level, but they're more raising awareness that we're changing this control, check it out. And
hey, try this new strategy.
Yeah, maybe the base effect or the thing that you could build around that was still powerful, but no one tried it. So they're trying to put in flags of attention to raise some attention. That you try out some other stuff, guys, and see if that flies. So
yeah, and it's also pointing to the future set too. Two of those keywords, if I'm not mistaken, are going to be in the new set, and I want to say I don't remember the number. I think one of the other problems too with the decks, how they were, besides being extremely unfun, not to insult anyone, but they were dummy decks. Like anybody could play it. Anybody could Quake and Cross Scale and Return to Nature. It's not hard. It doesn't take skill. You just keep on ramping and you keep on killing stuff. And it was so mind-numbingly boring to play against. And that's coming from somebody who plays semi-competitively. Imagine if you just start in the game and you're starting to climb up and you got your little aggro growth deck and you're like, hey, this is awesome. And then all of a sudden you get to about the 1500 level and then you just start getting waylaid constantly. I mean, how disheartening can that be? You know, and that's, I think, one of the main problems is that anyone can play them, and it also comes with the fact that more people do play them. But yeah, anybody can run that deck. It does not take skill. Where something like an order deck, not. I mean, even aggro order does, tempo order, whatever you want to call it, same damn thing. But that does take a little bit of skill, you know. But those DG decks and the energy decay decks are just so dummy proof.
I think they definitely they take skill, but I think after a certain point, the decisions become smooth. I think that the early game is really shaky for a lot of those decks still, actually. So that's where you need skills to navigate it. I think after you pass the hump of where you clearly are in control, you can do minor mistakes and still not suffer for it because you're at such a high power level then. But the early game is I think still really skill testing for those decks.
Yeah. And I think the problem is that the hump was too low, right? The hump was turn 12, if I'm not mistaken, turn 12 to 15. And if you didn't kill by 12 to 15 or had them in a bad way, you lost. And it would be another 20 turns before you actually lost the game. And
I will.
You know, what deck can kill on turn 12 consistently? You know, that's the problem. Go for it, Overlord.
I will come in here with my own comment about all this. That I have a few comments. Number one, I do not agree with they were very much played. I before anything, I'm just going to give it a few defenses, but I do agree that they were not fun and they need to be dealt with somehow. But one, I do not agree they were very much played. Two, I do not really agree that they are dumb decks. You need actually quite the skill in them is that as you mentioned, you need to get a certain hump, a certain threshold to reach into that dump place where you can just play whatever. And to reach it efficiently, you need to know, okay, what cards are really useful, what must I save, what must I sacrifice, and so on. It might sound like, well, that goes pretty much for everything, but it's very important for these specific, because ramping early and fast, that is everything for these decks. The part I didn't like with those control decks, which made them unfun, at least for me, is that they are very much guessing decks for the opponent. They don't use board really. They don't really use the board. You're just guessing what they have on the hand, and you have to try make tactics from guessing what they will do. You don't know what they will do, and that is what I didn't really like with them. It's very hard to try and play against something totally invisible, so to speak. And that was my problem. So
it's a really good point, actually, because I think that an underrated part of play skills is actually deck identification, and also like identifying the strong and important scrolls in the matchup. Also putting your opponent on a deck, putting your opponent on a hand, because most of the time after the hand quality is actually a little bit better now with mulligans than it was before. So that means that likely the opponent has a hand that they liked at some point. I mean, the probability says that they have now a hand that they're fairly confident that they can open with at least. And that means that something they have some kind of plan there, and trying to decipher that from their early plays is a skill that doesn't get talked about too much. In general, I think we don't talk nearly enough about play skills at all. Actually, I think that the reason why a lot of the top players are still at the top, regardless if they made the shifting, is that they are doing a lot of stuff in the game and making good decisions, because Scrolls is a really complex game
Very high skill setting.
from turn one, from the first play when you sack, or even before that when you mulligan. I mean, you already have very tough decisions that it could be game ending. Especially the mulligan thing is keeping the wrong hand there can hurt you plenty in the early game, and that can snowball into the late game. So, and every single turn you have to decide on which role you don't want to play at all and sack for resources or cards. So I mean, it's a very taxing game, and a lot of, if you just look at how many different decisions you can make in a turn with that, where you play your unit, how you move your other units. I mean, it's a ton of places where you can go a little bit wrong, or sometimes very wrong. And in general, all of these things with all of this discussion around decks and meta and all of that is sometimes hiding that there is a lot to learn about the play on an individual level and also on a community level. I think we're still there's probably tons of things to learn that we haven't figured out yet about the game when it comes to it actually being played rather than constructing its decks.
Yeah, I think one point before we move on is just the fact that one of the things that sets Scrolls apart is that it's played on a board, and these decks totally negated that. They played, as it was stated by Large Ice Coffee, they played their hand. They didn't play the board. If they got the draws, they won. If they didn't, they didn't. So that's I mean, that's my last kind of thought on that, because they didn't use the board. And I think Mon said that, actually, if I'm not mistaken, at some point in time, one of their main reasonings was they didn't use the board. That's that.
Yeah, I think it's a great point, actually, that it is more of a guessing game, because you're working with less information than a unit position war, for instance, where you can more or less plan a little bit more. And if the opponent has plenty of resources, nothing on the board, and plenty of scrolls, they could have anything.
Right.
But if they have two creatures, one scroll in hand, and you have some creatures, then you have more of an you can analyze that situation a bit more and make more informed decisions. I think the other one is just pure deck knowledge at that point, maybe counting on what they've played before, reading the few turns before, and seeing how they use the resources then. I mean, it's just a very different kind of situation, and maybe not this one that people isn't getting used to. So.
Yeah, so Mojang is going to have to think about how to, because control decks should be a part of the metagame, but try to think about how to have them interact with the board and have maybe a little bit more counterplay or something like that. But I would like to move on now to chat about some of the new mechanics that have come in the new patch. Some of them are one of them is a retread, or a couple of them are retreads from older mechanics that have now gotten a new name. This one's Unstable, which is basically the Loyal Darkling effect, where you deal damage directly to an idol. They've added Unstable to a couple of new cards: Rigged, Wicked Being, Reaping Mask, I think, are the three. Do you guys think any of these previously unused scrolls will start seeing play now that they deal direct idol damage?
Are we specifically only talking about those dealing direct idol damage by the Unstable? Are we taking all of the time here?
I think that
was kind of the question, I guess.
I think that the only scrolls that were not played before that will see play because of this effect is maybe Reaping Mask, and that's in some weird Eclipse deck, and you pop it on. But I don't know. I just don't see that. I like the mechanic. I think the mechanic is great. I'm all for direct idol damage. I think that is a great way for decks to finish someone off. I think it's a great way to end. Yes, I know you can't stop it. You can't redirect it, blah, blah, blah. I totally understand. But it's a good way to finish a game. I mean, it really is.
Well, that's a good point. If you can stop everything, then games are never going to end. So sometimes it's okay to have mechanics that circumvent other defensive strategies.
Yeah, for example, I never minded Watchergeddon. I never minded the damage from Watcher. I didn't like the fact that not only did you get the damage, you also had Husks that were attacking immediately. That was my main point. So it was way too much damage on the board at one time right? But the little 2 and 3 ping from Watcher, that's okay, awesome, totally fine with that.
I think that's a problem with Weeping Mask, probably that it is the same, breeds the same air as Necrogeddon, which is also a finisher. So I think if anything is holding it back, it's probably the cost. There is probably a lower cost point where it would be an interesting scroll, but at 7, I mean, it's extremely late game.
Yeah.
That's a lot to invest.
It's not, even though it has three different effects, it's not certain that that's actually gonna matter terribly at that point.
I don't think we're gonna see when it comes. For what I know, it was only Wicked Being and Reaping Mask that got the unstable. Loyal Darkling already had.
Rigged got this also. Yeah.
Rigged.
Let's see. Yeah, I said Reaping Mask.
No, rigged. The energy.
Rigged. True, rigged. Okay, because what I was about to say, I don't think any of these cards will really see competitive play, but I actually think that Wicked Being possibly rigged, but I don't think so. But Wicked Being, I think Wicked Being will see some play in certain niche decks that is very much about just killing the idol, so to speak.
I actually agree with that. I think one cost for 1 damage is good.
I'm trying to force it in a deck right now just to see if it'll actually work. But just to see.
I don't think it gives enough value to be in a competitive deck, just because you get that certainty of damage, so to speak, but you are taking space in the deck. That is the problem. But I think we're gonna see it from time to time in certain decks.
I think that the keyword itself is not a bad thing. It's just that exactly as you say. I mean, right now the effects that are on is very fragile. I mean, rigged is you have to have a structure. It has to get destroyed in melee combat, then it takes some damage, and then you do 1 damage to an idol.
Yeah.
And Wicked Being, you have to be attacked in melee. Then you have to do another damage to trigger the curse, and yeah, I mean it's just why Loyal Darkling, which is the other one that got sort of rewarded now into unstable instead. Why it's getting so much play is that it is a creature, and creatures are inherently.
And it's a human.
And it's a human, exactly.
It's a
human creature for 2, good cost. It comes down early, affects the game late as well. Early it can block for something, it can do some damage. It has all the synergies that the creatures have with dying and decay. And none of the other cards really do have that. So I think a lot of the traits that they put into this patch actually is going to be extremely good. But when it gets added to creatures. Magic Armor, for instance, innate on a creature. Same thing there. It's going to be probably an awesome creature, but the unstable on the enchantment, the enchantment part is something that you will only put the most powerful ones in your deck anyways, because you want to be mainly about... if you're doing bread and butter, you want to be mainly about creatures and spells, or other creatures and removals, I should say. If you're playing a pure tempo game, and everything else that is more conditional, and that needs to be really powerful to get put in, I think. So,
yeah,
not this batch, but we'll see. It's interesting that they choose to keyword it. That means that they can use it more, and then they're not afraid to use Idle Hate. I think that they like the way that it gives decks reach to end the game when they're ahead, rather than it getting stalled down and playing for 20 more turns.
Yeah, I have big hopes for unstable and future card design.
They also seem to buff the healing idols scrolls as well to compensate for that. So they're creating some interesting counterplay also with the Essence Feast and so on. So yeah,
right.
So.
Yeah, and the other point too about the idle hate, the idle direct damage is it's a way to shorten games. You know, I mean that extra 1 damage in an aggro deck really matters. You know, how many times have you played a Minor Growth aggro or Yellow Decay and you're just like, oh, 1 more damage?
Yeah. Well, 3 husks deals 9 damage and it takes 10 to kill an idol, so.
Exactly. Put a Wicked Being on that first husk. What's up?
Yep, there it is.
Anyway, all right, next.
Yeah. So moving away from the offensive unstable to the defensive Magic Armor. Magic Armor is just like regular armor, except obviously only affects spell damage. So, to Overlord, I'm going to start with you on this because I think you probably have played with Magic Armor more than anyone else in the entire world. So, and that probably includes the developers. What do you think about the mechanic? How have you liked it so far?
Well, the magic armor in of itself is strong and good. So just the trait in of itself is of course great. It's the same reason why like armor is great. Question perhaps regarding what they have put the magic armor on. It's the Pilgrim's. Let me remind. It's Pilgrim's Feet, Resonant Helm, Ellen Vital Leeching Ring, Vitroil Hour. I can never.
I'm glad you have
pronounce
that list because I could never remember all that.
I look at it on the test server.
And Oak Blood. Really, that was. It's a lot of growth that
Yeah.
is getting it. But
It's
at the same
5
time,
growth and 2
growth has
order,
a shit ton of enchantments that is not used. So that will not surprise me. I have not experimented too much when it comes to growth. I've seen some of it a bit used, but I don't know how well it's worked for them. And when it comes to Resonant Helm and Pilgrim's Feet, I will say Pilgrim's Feet is actually really good. I've said it since the Pilgrim's Feet was introduced in Rebellion. I think many agreed on it that it gives great value. It's just that you don't need healing, but it gives great value for what it does. And Resonant Helmet that gives magic armor too. Do you understand how much?
Armor.
Do you understand how many spells I resist with 2 magic armor?
Plus, with resonance, so it's gaining health when the spell is played. I'm not sure how that actually stacks as far as order of operations go, but
But Resonant Helm, even with the magic armor too, it's actually a bit worse because you cannot control the healing, and you want to kind of control the healing, at least in deck I do. In short, because I'm gonna leave the word to you other people here, I will say they are really good now, but they need to be in a deck that needs them. I'm not sure that deck in of itself is good enough.
so another nice mechanic going forward, maybe not on the random one cost enchantments it's on now, but in future spells and future units, it might be pretty potent.
It might be potent right now if I can make the deck work, and it's almost working. It's using a lot of enchantments.
I don't think that the Resonant Helm is that far off from being a potion of resistance. I mean,
That's
cost
true.
is great, cost is great, and two pretty good. The thing with magic armor, which makes it better than ward in some cases, is that it actually gets less into trouble when it comes to
Thunder Surge
mass removal. Yeah, exactly, Quake and so on. Yeah, it gets pretty impervious to a lot of things.
If you're feeling really bold, you can splash into your growth deck, and when you quake the board, your guy survives with the resonant helmet.
Yeah.
I will not. I will
one of
not say it's better than Ward. I'm gonna take it short, just because Ward, it protects you against so many other things. It protects you against everything that can, for example, remove enchantments. In a hole, it protects against pushbacks. It protects against flips. It protects against violent dispersal that hurts like hell, even with magic armor.
Right.
And it protects against damning curse. It protects against so much that is so important to protect against. Magic armor, it's good, but it protects you, as you said, mostly against those global stuff. We got.
And poison, yes. Talk about that, Spiffy Drill.
Poison.
That's big.
One of the things actually I want to say really quick about the Resonant Helm, if I'm just starting out the game and I pick Order, I am happy as shit to see that. That looks like a great scroll if you're a brand new player. Just saying. It just is. All right, so Poison. Poison is magic damage, which means that magic armor stops it. Which means that if you're what the hell is it called? The thing that bounces around, the poison spell.
Infectious Blight.
Infectious Blight. If Infectious Blight hits that, then it's basically a dead scroll.
This is true.
And it sits there. That's awesome. Now, I think I may be going out on a limb here, but I think that poison damage should be reclassified, because if you look at they've started classifying some stuff. I'm trying to look at my computer really quick. Soul Steel is now a
Destruction
what is
type?
it? It's now a destruction, a spell destruction.
Yeah, that's
So I
something
think
that actually wasn't in the patch notes, but a lot of
Right.
scrolls now
Oh,
have
yeah.
that subtyping.
Yeah, that's really cool. Now, I think poison should be a different damage type. I think that there should be combat damage, there should be spell damage, and then poison should be its own subset. I honestly believe that it should be its own subset.
Just to allow for different card design to interact with it in different ways.
Yeah, because having a Magic Armor 1, basically, hopefully with the next set, you'll have enough Magic Armor and Ward to build a deck that will be completely, totally impervious to decay. If I'm not mistaken. That's just guessing on what's going to be in, and I may be wrong, but, you know, if you have 3 creatures in a deck that have Magic Armor of 1 or more, that kills all poison strategy, which basically leaves decay and the meta shifting
more of the traditional creature.
Right, to where they have to destroy stuff and deal with damage. So I don't know. That's rough, but I do think that it should be its own damage type. That's my
It kind of is. It kind of is. I just looked up Infectious Blight. A fun thing, actually, what I saw, that it also has enchantment destruction for some reason. Go figure.
Yeah.
But actually,
Wait,
that mentions if enchanted unit is killed by poison damage, and that, as you know, I mean, it not
that does
only
make it a different type. You're right.
Yeah, it not only triggers on its own poison damage, but also for instance from any poison source. So it's already its own damage. It's just that it's not. It's still. It's spell damage is the main type, and then it's also poison damage, sort of.
Right.
So
the type of damage needs to be clarified, because we know that there's combat damage and then there's damage, but there should be combat damage, there should be spell damage, and then poison damage. That way it clarifies.
Can't it be like a tree though, instead of like a list of different damage types? Can't it be like spell damage and combat damage, for instance, and then you have subsets under that? It's kind of what we have now.
Well, but then you would have to reword stuff. You would have to basically reword magic armor to have another subtype as well. So like magic armor, all magic armor, or is it just magic armor, poison?
Right.
You know, so one of the things has to get a modifier in order for it to make sense. I do think that the damage type, because you're really not going to see poison damage anywhere except for decay. Yes, I know that there's the one growth enchantment, which is horrible, which needs to go away. But I think that should be. And there's a lot of people have been worried about keywords. There's too many keywords now, and there's too much. I can name just off the top of my head in Magic the Gathering, because I used to play a long time ago, how many keywords and abilities are no longer there. There are already more than how many keywords are in Scrolls, period. Just saying. So, you know, maybe if they have like a little rule book or something that has, these are all the keywords, blah, 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 blah. If someone can't figure out to actually hover over the text, but that's another story. That's a hope and a prayer. Cough, Mons, cough.
I think that the problem with Resonant Helm, for instance, is that it doesn't do what it says on the card.
Yeah.
Because they say resonance. The problem there is that when they put it out in the patch notes, they say that resonance means when you play a spell, action happens. That means that resonance 2, for instance, should be resonance
heal 2
healing 2 or something like that. I mean, it just doesn't say anything what the scroll is actually doing. If you imagine that was a physical card and didn't have the tooltip effect, I mean, it says nothing about what the resonance actually does. The resonance is just that it triggers off you playing a spell. So I think that they still need to work on the wording on some of the keywords, and it was the same thing when they tried to clean up like lobber and all of that.
That's true.
Yeah, so they still have some work to do, I think, on exactly how they're presenting the keywords. But keywording, it is also keeping the texts down, not only on the scrolls that the effect is on, but also on the scrolls that reference that kind of effect.
Right.
They don't need to say every time a creature that it cares about a spell being played has that effect triggered, and this is not happening or something like that. If you want to have a nullify spell of that, instead you can say that resonant effects do not apply or something like that.
So I'm going to quote you out of context and say that you're predicting a resonance deck 5 years from now. Am I okay doing that?
No, in waypoints, I think.
Okay,
I think that they promised on they pretty much alluded to that monster in the previous podcast that they wanted more spell synergy within order. So I think that you'll see more in waypoints. That's a pretty safe prediction, I would say.
Fair enough.
They're just trying it out. I think that they were, if I read it correctly, I think they were hesitant on putting this one in now instead of changing it at waypoints instead. But sometimes they want to like almost future sight stuff. They put it in before it becomes the real thing. So they've done that before. So I think
kind of a nice little peek ahead.
This will come back again. I'm just glad that they decided to name Magic Armor instead of Resistance instead. So they would put out Resonance, Resistance, and Replenish in the same.
Many artsy words. Well, since you brought up Replenish, I'll take the opportunity to transition to it. Replenish, I think has the potential to be the most broken mechanic in history, but obviously right now on the scrolls it's on is not going to have that effect. So I don't want people to quote me as saying that Replenish is going to ruin the world or anything like that, but I am really concerned by any free mechanic in any card game, mostly because of my history with Magic the Gathering, and every free mechanic they've ever tried to make has ended up being horribly broken. So I'm confident that Mojang knows that. They've studied their history, they've played the game, and I doubt they'll make the exact same mistakes. But anyway, Replenish, they're trying to use as a way to transition easily into Wild, because as they've noted, there's a tempo problem with Wild where it's kind of awkward when you want to make that first sacrifice into your second resource, and they're hoping that these, giving you temporary Wild, will allow you to do that. Overlord, will you talk a little bit about what you think about Replenish?
I think it's not as I'm not as invested into Magic the Gathering, so I cannot back up into the information there as you can. But I do not think it's as doomsday as you say. Mostly because it's not in my opinion, it's not a free card because it costs a card.
Right, that's a great point. I want to clarify that now. It's free as far as resources.
Yeah, it's free when it comes to resources, but honestly, at least in my experience in Scrolls, resources it's important, but least important. Just take, for the example, when it came to the power trip still gives those resources, but that doesn't make it as potent as when it gives the card draw. The whole card thing is what really matters often. So that sort of balance it out. Can it be broken in the future? Absolutely. It depends what they give the Replenish to. The Replenish idea, I kind of like it. But they need, as you say, tread a bit carefully with that. With the current ones they have in the game, I, of course, only really tried extensively with the order ones, and I find some good synergy there, although not competitive, but it's really fun to pull out the surprise factor with that. I like the flexibility it gives. It gives what? So it gives very much flexibility in your splashing and such.
Did you try it with the splashing, or have you tested that if this actually works for color fixing? Or is it just because you just basically play the free spell?
Can you repeat the question? I didn't.
I mean, have you tried it? Does it actually give you any benefit that it's wild instead of? I mean, if it gave you 2 order instead, back.
Well,
so it's really free.
Well, I won't be in. I won't really. I won't have as many options.
No, but as I was saying, have you seen the actual that it's wild that you're getting? Have you seen it make a huge impact compared to if you got 2 order instead from the stuff that you played?
Yes, because what I use with it is not in order.
Yeah, so but you've seen that work with the splashes. It's interesting to see if it's actually, because I think that it's actually, as Morgan said, what they're after is the resource fixing. I mean, they don't really want to be portrayed as a free spell. It's more sort of like a smaller effect right now that also smooths out your multi resource decks. But I'm a little bit skeptical to if it will actually work in practice fully with that, or if it's just gonna be you're still gonna use a fairly minute effect if they keep this power level going to fix your resources, but not permanently. And the problem with power trip, as you said, now when it's being played so little at the moment, is just because temporary resource gain still seems to be fairly weak in the game. Compared to using a scroll to do an effect. Because the problem is that if you give up a scroll to do a temporary fix at this point, you're giving up a scroll that you could have used for permanent ramping instead. So it kind of hurts a lot your future turns. So it's interesting to see if you have any experience on that, or if you have any thoughts on that.
I have to say, just something I will say, because I see both in the chat and I see it many times in forums and such. And that is where I think Replenish can really make work, and they won't really do now. Replenish at the moment is on cards that needs something to help those cards actually be useful, because they are not that useful on their own. If you have Replenish on a card that is actually useful on their own, then you can start to make combos with the Replenish that is not needed to be with this card. For example, like Antorad said here in chat, you can use Champion Ring or Mangonel and then use the Replenish card on something else that is not the Mangonel, and so on. You can people have all kinds of ideas what you can splash around and all that kind of stuff, and that is when Replenish will really come to work and become really potent, because in the end it all comes down to get as much value as possible from these cards. But right now it's not that flexible, because the Replenish is needed for the card that gives Replenish. For the card itself, it's not that good on its own, and that is sort of...
I think that's a good point. I guess one of my concerns is right now, if you're playing these scrolls, you're playing them for Replenish, and the rest of the text is largely irrelevant. Maybe you'll get some advantage out of Blood Boil or at Pertence, but probably not in the vast majority of situations. And my concern is that if they ever make a better scroll with Replenish, like, for example, a 3-cost Spark Replenish or something like that, or a 2-cost Spark Replenish, or anything that had any useful effect, then we're getting into scary territory. So my concern is it's either really, really bad or way too powerful. Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. You know, it is, they've seen that problem in Magic, but also one of the things too is it's kind of like when Pother was one order. I mean, everyone played Pother just to do it, right? But I think the chat's kind of hit it, and so has all the forums and whatnot. It's a combo mech, and I think that's all it will ever be, because if you put it on anything too strong, it gets too good. You know, you put it on a creature, it gets too good. Put it on, you know, a Spark or whatever, it's too good. It's a combo mechanism. The only really like one-shot crazy kill combo thing now is do something with growth, have a bunch of dudes on, play Replenish, play Eclipse, and then Necrogeddon, and maybe a Crimson Bull before or something like that. I don't know, but
that is quite the combo. Like
quite the combo.
We need more of that in the game.
Like, oh crap!
I like it.
You know,
like...
I mean, that's about the only thing I could see is something splashy like that. But the only thing that's possible to do with is Decay, because it has Eclipse, and Eclipse is an enabler that allows you to use that one wild that you have to. Man, this bat is really annoying because I'm Italian. I talk with my hands. But anyway, so it's like yeah, that's the only thing that is you can use, because all the Replenish stuff is 1 or 2, and then you play that, you get 1 or 2. What are you going to do that's going to affect anything with 2 wilds?
Right.
You know, Machinated, maybe. You know, okay, bam, Machinated on a Great Wolf. Awesome. That cleared a row. And what? You know, like it's nothing too scary yet, but we don't have the pieces for a true combo deck yet. The closest to a true combo deck was the old Watchergeddon.
Right.
That's the closest we ever came. And they need some more scrolls in there with activating things that can activate combos.
Right.
There's no Dragon Storm. There's nothing that auto wins games.
Yeah, and I think combo decks can be a nice piece of the metagame, so I don't want to sound like I hate combo decks or think they're a boogeyman or anything. But we already have really, really good tutors in Scrolls. We have the ones that search for a creature, so if there was a creature that you wanted to find every time and you could play it as the only creature in your deck, that could be a concern. So there are some pieces of combo decks already there. We just don't have a win condition yet.
I think that there's the replenish, and there's also this. I don't know exactly what they're doing with the big temporary resource gains into energy. I see that they're putting it into energy now, like with the growth memorial, and also how they reworked energy siphon.
Right.
Parts I like it. In parts I'm a little bit fearful because they're putting if they ever did it the other way around, there could be a net effect of actually increasing resources. So if you had something cost 3 in growth, you get 5 energy, and then you have something costing 3 energy, you get 5 growth. You can cycle that, and if you have something then that can grow scrolls, then you're starting to get into infinite territory. If you can just get to that point. And I don't know if we want that. I think it seems like they're treading a very fine line here. What they can actually release before this might become a problem. And I think that if people don't like playing against control decks at this point, which still is like interaction, playing against pure combo decks is a completely different story when you don't have any instants, you don't have any counters, you don't have any sack mechanics within their turn, so you can just sit there and literally watch. It's like in Magic, if someone played a spell on you that says you can't interact on your opponent's turns, and then they go off. I mean, it's like they get it from free in Scrolls. So it seems like it's a very, very tough design space, and given that resource ramping, resource gain, and all of this is, and also card draw is really, really tough to balance. They're treading dangerous territory here.
But they are making cool
if they
mechanics.
want to make replenish, if they want to make replenish a thing, I mean, obviously they want to use it, but I think that they are very limited in what they can actually put it on.
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to put in my thoughts here that, well, we are talking a bit like how this can go wrong, but let's say they only put replenish on cards that are not that strong on their own like it is now. And what that means is, in order to make this card work, they need some kind of friend to help them out. And with replenish, you broaden the search wide for it. So, for example, what they do really work and have synergized is the Soldier Bond and the Vengeance Veil, as they work very well with Desperation and Iron Whip, as you can use those to work with them, and they can actually turn things quite well around for you if you have the combo in hand, which is not too hard to pull off and find. And I just want to then pose the question: isn't that okay? I find that a totally fine thing to have in the game.
Yeah, I actually agree with you there. With the way it is right now, and assuming that they don't make mistakes with what they put this mechanic on, I think Replenish could actually be a lot of fun and enable some just nice little splashes, some interesting deck builds, some cool synergies and things like that. And I wouldn't have a problem with that. I guess I am colored by my history with Magic the Gathering and horrible combo decks, and I'm just concerned that those mistakes could be made again.
Yeah, I think that the batch that we got now is perfectly fine, and possibly also fun. I think it seems like I think they can do good things with it. It's just that they need to be very careful, I think.
Yeah, so I love you, Mons. I love you, Mojang. I love the developers of this game. I'm not saying that you're going to ruin everything by printing a draw 2 cards, replenish for 3 order or something like that. Please don't. But please don't print an order cantrip by all means. But I'm confident that you guys are going to do good things with this mechanic, and I just want to see it be cool and not break the game in half.
Don't put card draw on it ever.
Yeah, because then it will be absolute auto include with 0 downside.
I think that's called Power Trip.
Right,
Moving on.
Yeah, moving on. Yeah, freaking Power Trip.
Yeah. Well, we only have a few more minutes left in the show. So, what I want to talk about a little bit is I want to circle back to the beginning because what brought all of this on is concerns that Wild was being used, but not necessarily in the way that Mojang intended. Because in order to make Wild work, you have to have these certain enabling scrolls rather than just having a deck that used multiple resources. Anti-Rad made the great comment in our comment section that Replenish is interesting, but is just like these cross-resource ramp scrolls in that in order to use a Wild deck, you need to use certain scrolls. Can you guys, I don't know what to ask necessarily, but Spiffy Drew, will you just talk a little bit about what we can do to enable multicolored decks that don't rely on specific scrolls?
We can totally cover this in 4 minutes. Go specific.
Yeah, totally. As it stands right now, no.
Fair enough.
It's perfectly. It's reliant upon the cross-faction ramp scrolls, which have now been fixed. Yeah, and nerf bombard. Okay, next.
Yes,
Okay,
sir.
shall I make a comment? Because I have this feeling that this will talk a lot.
You got 30 seconds. Hurry up, go.
Oh, dear.
Yeah, I need to be short here. My feeling is that I think Wild is at the moment not working, but who expected this? It's a very new kind of mechanic thing,
Yeah.
and that they introduced. Who expected it just to work splendidly? It will take a long ass time, and when I say long ass time, I don't mean 2-3 weeks. I mean bloody 4 months, if not more, to make this thing work. And people, I do not think really have that kind of understanding. Sometimes they are like, this ruined the whole game. No, it's ruined the game temporarily, and we're trying to make it work here.
So you're
And
saying
so,
Scrolls is in
so-
beta, but Wild is in alpha right now?
Yeah.
A little bit, but I can't to be criticized to not criticize just the community, but also criticize Mojang. I can feel sometimes like, as in this patch and so on, that I'm all for trying new stuff. It's always exciting, but it's hard to balance, give good judgment and balance things out when when we are not really fixing all the broken stuff yet. Before we are fixing the broken stuff, we are introducing new stuff that we need to sort of balance it out, and becomes one big mesh
point.
pile of
Fair
stuff.
point.
And it's very hard to try say, well, is Wild good? Don't think so. But there's so much around. I made the metaphor already. Like, it feels like we are trying to test if these tires are good, but the motor is not really working. So it's hard to try to say.
It's hard to even
tires are good
come to a
here.
conclusion about the tires.
So now I pass over to Susp about
All right,
Final
30
words.
seconds, go.
It's going to be interesting to see if now finally people got their Quake nerf.
Yeah, we haven't even talked about the Quake nerf. What are we doing?
It came wrapped in a lot of other stuff that
Yeah.
kind of overshadowed
I
it.
love
But
it. We nerfed Quake when people stopped using Quake.
Right? Finally, people
Exactly.
stopped using it.
exactly. That's,
Well-
it's the thing with. I mean, it was played. Don't get me wrong, but there was definitely. If you said this 4 or 5 months ago that you would see growth decks without decay. Sorry, growth decks without decay. Growth decks without Quake. We're wrapping soon here, hopefully. I mean, you would get like a laugh, and I mean, there was no aggro deck, no growth aggro deck at the time, and then they introduced very good aggro scrolls. Earthborn Mystic is a ton of power in one scroll. They filled the gap that it had in the 3 power curve. Look what happened. Really, really powerful deck emerges from nowhere. Doesn't play Quake. Most of the builds don't play Fertile Soil. Unheard of a couple of
Yeah.
months ago.
Absolutely.
I mean, and it just makes it seems hard as Ludwig says with telling how much of a problem is Wild right now, and how much of a problem is certain scrolls, and how much of things we can fix here with these changes.
And who knows what
it's
everything's going to look like in 3 months when new decks
Really,
are out.
really hard to tell at this point, I think. Puppet Soldier is probably also one of the bigger ones.
Yeah.
Thank
I would say.
God. Thank God.
But that was just silly still. I mean,
Yeah.
talk about non-interactive.
Yeah,
May I-
the
may I
one
also-
comment on the nerf really quick is the taxing on nerf should be 2. If you need to up it back up to 6 or whatever, it's just too high. Taxing 3 is really
so 6,
high.
8, 10, 12.
6, 8, 10, 12. Or if you do a taxing 3 on a scroll, it should start at like 1 or 2.
Yeah.
It should never start on a scroll that expensive.
Well, I might throw 1 5-cost Quake in my aggro growth deck just for fun.
Yeah, it should never be that high. A few of the nerfs, I fully agree totally with Violent Dispersal. I like how energy is just damage. It doesn't destroy stuff anymore. It destroys
Yeah, that was a
damage.
clean change. That was good.
Everything was a pretty good nerf hammer hit. Like I said, nerf Bombard, nerf Machinated. I'm done.
Yeah, I think I overall I agree. I think I think the direction they took was good. If the execution was flawless, no. But but that's the thing. Well, what I just want to comment that I'm just feeling when we have this patch with all this new stuff is once again, I like we're getting new stuff, but I'm a bit feeling here that since we got armor introduced, since we got Slayer introduced, since we got all this stuff introduced, we're not really getting much more that is having this stuff. We keep getting new stuff. It would be kind of fun to get something else with armor, something
to flesh
else
out these mechanics
something
rather
else,
than...
so you can start like with a deck around it or something. That is sort of how I'm feeling about it.
Fair enough. Well, I'm going to take that opportunity to go ahead and end the show. But if you can, I guess if you can take away one thing is that whatever has been changed, we need a lot more testing. Most of you know that the test server is now open every Monday European time to anybody that wants to download, I guess, as long as you have a Windows PC. But Ludwig is all alone on the test server. He needs friends. Please play Mondays with him. That way he stops asking us all the time to play.
Although European afternoons, I'm gone.
Fair enough. So please come help us test every Monday. We definitely need to run these things through the gamut. These aren't even on the live server yet. Who knows what the change log is going to look like even a week from now. And then the last thing I'm going to say is check us out on iTunes. Ice Cream put a lot of work into making that happen for us. So you can now download us to your iPod and listen to us on the go should you be so inclined to hear my voice while you're driving around for some reason. But other than that, thank you all for joining us. Thank you for my guests for coming on. And same time next week. Thank you all.
Yeah.
Bye, guys.
Have a happy new day.